I was speaking with a Japanese friend the other day, and he just couldn't understand what's happening in UK. And he asked me, it's like, why are the politicians in favor of mass migration? And I tried my best to explain it to him, and it's like, yeah, but like, if the politicians notice that the British people stop being in favor of migration, like, why don't they have a conversation? Why did they have a dialogue? And this question got me thinking, because it's a very reasonable one. Especially when you realize that the behavior of modern day politicians are bewildering for people from Asia. And I'm pretty sure like they would bewilder even people who lived 30 years ago in the past. There doesn't seem to be any rationale, any reason on why they're behaving the way they are. So we do have to come up with an answer. Now, I think there's multiple answers. There's multiple people doing this for various reasons. But if you're interested in the actual ideology, if you're interested on why it's actually happening, I think the best explanation would be the Hegelian view of history. You see, most of the elites that exist in the West right now, whether they're politicians, whether they're people from the academia, whether they're school teachers, or whether they're just like liberals that are normal citizens, they all share the same ideology, the same worldview. And that worldview is that history is progressive. History doesn't just have a couple of events that happen at random. History is actually taking humanity from the Stone Age, and we're moving towards Star Trek. In fact, this is like one of the main themes in Star Trek, which was written by liberal writers, who believe that in order for a planet to discover space travel, that they actually first need to put aside their differences, form a world government, abolish the nation state, and only then can they work together in order to develop the warp engine. And once they do that, they're welcomed into the galactic community. And before that, they're not really worthy of any consideration. They're just left to their own devices, right? Like that is the plot of many Star Trek episodes. And this is the actual worldview that these people have. And it's why it's in a TV show. It's because the people who wrote the TV show shared the worldview. So basically they believe that the natural course of humanity was tribalism. But eventually, as time progresses, people start forming kingdoms and monarchies. And that is unstable, like that is not sustainable, because eventually people will rise up. They rise up against oppression, so they overthrow the monarchy, they overthrow the kingdoms, and they bring about different systems, whether it's fascism, whether it's capitalism, whether it's Nazism or communism. The idea is that this is the progress of history, right? So like from tribalism to kingdoms to these various different ideologies which are going to fight with each other, and eventually capitalism wins. And they can't really deny this because it's what happened after the Cold War. So they know that, okay, well, democracy with capitalism is the victor. But as we mentioned, history doesn't stop, right? So like there needs to be a progress from this. This is also unsustainable. We haven't reached Star Trek yet. So like what is the next step? And they believe that the next step is a global market where you have no borders, where you have one world government, and where you have no nationality. So basically, every single plot of land, every single country is not really a nation state, but it's now just like an economic zone where transactions happen. And people are like human resources. It doesn't matter if you have like a Greek, or you have a Romanian, or you have a German. Like everyone is just as talented as everyone else, given the same socioeconomic factors. Everyone can be successful. And whether you're Israel or Pakistani or Palestinian, it doesn't matter. Like everyone can live in the same place together in harmony. Because we're all human beings. And there is no more racism. There is no more nationalism. It's just like working for the common good. Under the shepherdhood of whatever world government happens to exist. And in this utopia, companies can just set up shop anywhere. They can hire anyone, right? Like they don't really need to have any loyalty to a nation state. They don't really need to worry about tariffs. They don't need to worry about different regulations. They don't need to worry about different laws. Because there's the same laws everywhere. There's the same regulations everywhere, right? So, this is what they consider progress. Like, this is what they consider is the next step of human evolution. So, in order to achieve that, they have to destroy nationality. They have to make sure that people don't identify themselves as German. They don't identify themselves as Italian. They don't identify themselves as British. They identify themselves as part of the European Union, or eventually, I guess, like citizens of the world, part of the United Nations or what have you. And in order to destroy nationality, you gotta just, do what the Soviet Union used to do back in the day, where, for instance, like, they would conquer a new country, like they would conquer Moldova or something, and they would just, like, deport people into Siberia and bring in ethnic Russians and make sure that people have less in common with their neighbors and encourage the strife, so that they're not focusing on the Soviet Union that's doing this to them. They're focusing on their neighbors. Like, these types of tactics have been tried and true throughout history, so they're nothing really new. But what they don't like is when they notice something like Brexit happening. Like, that really scares the living shit out of them, because it shouldn't be possible. Like, people shouldn't want this. It's a regression of history. Like, we are supposed to progress towards the European Union, and what happens in the UK is horrifying for the establishment, because again, it contradicts everything they believe about the world. So because of that, they have to punish now the people from the UK. They have to go like, no, like, these people are far right, which translates to not worthy of consideration. So we're not going to negotiate with them. We're not going to talk with them. We are just going to accelerate what we've been doing. And we're going to crack down harder with facial recognition and digital ID and all the other shit. So basically, when you understand where they're coming from, a lot of this makes more sense. And you also notice how they justify it, right? Like, they look at the United States and they see how the United States has actually managed to melt down all the nationalities from Europe. And people in the US don't identify themselves as German, Irish, Italian. They identify themselves as Americans. So basically, because it was possible there, they're now trying to make it at a grander scale. And again, like, the European Union is the project that they like. They actually call it gardening. Like, I heard many EU EMPs, like, expressing themselves about the EU like this. Like, the EU is a garden, right? So, like, what is a garden? Well, a garden is a place where you have plants, but they're not allowed to grow any way they want. They have, like, the gardener that trims and makes sure that everything looks beautiful. And that's how they view the European Union. That's how they view their project. Like, they don't allow people to become far right. They start trimming and they're starting clipping and making sure that the garden looks beautiful. Now, it's important to understand that this is the ideology. Whether the people that are pushing for the current trends believe the ideology or not, that is up for debate. Because you can have a major corporation that doesn't believe the ideology. Like, they don't necessarily believe that one world government is a good thing. But they can like the fact that they can now hire people from abroad for cheaper labor and they can make more profits. Like, for instance, they don't have to follow, the minimum wage that's set in the United States. Instead, they can open something in Mexico. They have people crafting their product there. They import it in the US. They do all these legal loopholes. So they would support open borders. They would support the current establishment, not because they actually care or they believe that history has, like, a progressive end, but simply due to the fact that it's convenient for them. You may have people that just, go along with it because they make a lot of money. Like, you can have a leftist politician that entered with a leftist platform and is now making tens of thousands of dollars on the taxpayer dime. So he just likes his seat. So he will say whatever is needed. He will vote any way it's needed. He doesn't really care about anything, right? Like, he's not an ideologue. He doesn't believe in it. But it's advantageous for him and his family. So this is what's happening. Like, this is the ideology that I think governs the modern liberal. And one of the main reasons that there is such a political divide between liberals and conservatives right now is the different values. And if you don't have the same values, you may as well just not be able to talk with one another. Because imagine, like what is the value that people need to have in order to read a map? Well, they need to at least decide where north is, right? Like, if you can't get two people to decide where north is on a map, then there is no reason to actually try and have a conversation or where Switzerland is or where, there's no point in that because they can't agree with the very basic fundamental. And I think this is the point where liberals and conservatives have reached. On one hand, conservatives, they really care about the nation state and they care about the family. So they want just a peaceful life where nothing changes. They just want to live their life the same way that their parents did, and they really care about their family. For them, the worst thing that can happen is for their kid to emigrate, to just go into another country and then they grow old without kids, or for their kid not to want to have kids of their own, or for his kid to not be able to get a job and be unhappy, right? Like, these are the values that conservatives care about. They care about stability, they care about family, and they also care about maintaining the culture that they grew up in. A liberal thinks completely differently. Like, I actually spoke with liberals, and the fundamental difference in values is enormous. A liberal doesn't care about family as much. I mean, maybe they do, but they view technology as bridging the gap. So, like, if you have a liberal that just decides to emigrate into another nation, he doesn't view it as abandoning his family because he still sends the money on PayPal. He still talks to them on Zoom. So, like, they view that they're still part of the family, even though, like, they don't come home for Christmas, right? So, the liberal is a citizen of the world. He just goes to a place that he likes, and if the place starts becoming bad, they just go to another place. So you can have a Romanian that just doesn't like it here, and then they go to Spain, and now things are going bad in Spain. You know, the economy is taking a turn for the worse, and maybe crime is on the rise. So they're going to France, and they don't like it in France, so they go to New York. Like they don't really have any attachment to a particular place. They just go from country to country, right? And working at various corporations, sometimes working remote. So like, as a conservative, it's impossible to reach these people. Like, you can tell them, well, things are getting unsafe, and they're like, well, why don't you leave? And you can tell them, well, things are going unsafe. It's like, well, you know, like, why should it be safe there and unsafe in other places of the world? Like I even had a conversation with the liberal, and they were like, oh, I went to Brazil, and all those rich people, my God, like, they had gated communities. Like, they would lock themselves up and let everyone else suffer from crime. And you know, like, this kind of blew my mind. It's like, well, I mean, how do you even talk like, how do you even interact with that? Like, how do you even begin a conversation like that, right? It's like, oh, those rich people defending their property rather than just suffering like everyone else. It just doesn't make any sense, right? They just cannot understand how it's like to be a conservative. They just cannot fathom. But, like, in their mind, if the rich people would just pack up and live somewhere else, that would be fine. But they just don't like the fences. It's insane. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.